Hey folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike Show. Today we're going to talk about something that I think people were talking about a little bit, but I'm not real sure they're talking about it enough. As you may or may not know, probably do know, Mike is one of the people involved with Vets for Trump, and so Mike and I talk about President Trump fairly often, both being veterans and both supporters of the president. We find ourselves talking about the president and some of the unique ways he goes about doing his business fairly often. I'm a big supporter of the policies of President Trump, not always the way he goes about it or the way he talks about himself or others, but generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with his presidency. But the question for today's video is, are you tired of winning yet?
And the answer for me is no.
No. Well, recently we had a couple of things happen at the national level, and over the past couple of months, there's been all kinds of dire predictions. The sky is falling, the sky is falling, oh, woe is me. United States of America is going to collapse. And there were several reasons why people were talking about that kind of stuff. First, the liberal progressives were running around saying, Donald Trump can't put tariffs on everybody. It's like putting a 20% tax on everything we buy. Well, that's not actually how it worked out. So we're going to outline a couple of things, and then we're going to probably talk about them a little bit more in detail. But so Mike and I, last week, we were talking about the president, and I happened to come across a video by Victor Davis Hanson. And you may be familiar with Mr. Hanson. Victor Davis Hanson is a popular opinion maker, perspective. He works for a couple of different organizations, and I'm not sure which one that he actually put this particular video out under. But Mike, because he's so good at this kind of stuff,
I don't recall the institution.
Hoover
Institution.
I was going to say the Hoover Institution, but I think Mike will put a link down there so you can see what Victor Davis Hanson had to say for himself. But if you look at it as being a presidency of just a tad over 6 months, it's a pretty impressive resume. In no particular order, Donald Trump said that he would put a rein on inflation. He has done that to some degree, and we'll talk about that in detail. He also said that other nations were robbing the United States blind through not doing fair trade with the United States, but rather giving us trade deals that benefited them and hurt us. As a matter of fact, not only hurt us, but hurt our manufacturing base and hurt our opportunity to add jobs. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. And the progressive response to that was, oh no, my goodness, you can't possibly put tariffs on things. That'll double inflation. It'll cause inflation to go through the roof. It's like Americans get a 20% tax increase on everything they buy. Well, that didn't happen, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. Then the president decided that Iran had to come to the table and negotiate their unwillingness to step back from creating a nuclear weapon, simply because Iran is one of the greatest state-sponsored terrorist organizations. I mean, they are one of the most. They do more sponsoring of terrorist nations than any other nation state. So, as a nation, they're sponsoring terrorism in many different kinds through many different proxies. So, Donald Trump gave him a deadline. We will have a non-nuclear proliferation deal in 60 days, and day 61, the Israelis bombed Tehran and bombed the nuclear facilities, and then within a week or so, the United States of America dropped the bunker buster bomb and basically put the uranium enrichment business in Iran out of business, and we'll talk about that a little bit. He's done some other things as well. Ukraine is in a war with Russia, and just this past week, the United States of America did not give weapons to Ukraine. Rather, they sold weapons to our NATO allies in Europe because Europe is where the Ukraine and Russia war is happening. And then NATO gave the weapons to Ukraine. So notice the difference there. We didn't give them to Ukraine. We sold them to NATO, and NATO gave them to Ukraine because it's in NATO's best interest. It's in the Europeans' best interest for the war in between Russia and Ukraine to not end badly for Ukraine. Oh, by the way, Donald Trump also got the NATO nations to increase their commitment to the NATO organization, move it up from 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP. You may remember in the first Trump administration, he told the NATO nations, if you don't pony up your 2%, we're not going to protect you. We may not protect you. So he got them to give the 2%. Now they're willingly giving 5%. And the winner of the week is just this past week. We had a couple of Supreme Court decisions, one of which was men are not allowed to participate in women's sports, and the other was that Donald Trump, the executive branch, does in fact have the authority to fire 1,400 people from the Department of Education. So I don't know of any losses that he may have had. As a matter of fact, when the lower court tried to block some of his immigration orders, the Supreme Court said, I'm sorry, lower court, you don't have the jurisdiction over the executive branch and able to do a nationwide ban on what you're trying to do to stop the immigration laws from being enforced. So I would say that's a hell of a lot of winning going on there, Mike.
Yeah, overall. One thing I guess is the Democrats continue to try and fight the battle. I think there was another judge that put in a nationwide injunction, but I don't know. I don't know how it's all going to work. If the Supreme Court was speaking to a certain select small part of what the whole issue is, or if they address the whole thing, I think Congress needs to step in and clarify the law, and that's a lot of times what the Supreme Court says is you didn't do a very good job of formulating the law. So if you want to clarify, the Congress needs to do that, and they have been working on other things.
Big beautiful bill.
Well, that passed, and then we did have trouble the other day just getting $9 billion clawed back from waste, fraud, and abuse. It was hard to believe that they had to cajole 3 Republicans to. I don't even remember what the final vote did. Vice President Vance need to be pulled in?
I don't think not for that one. No, they had to be pulled in for the big beautiful bill. But what they were arguing about is 9.4 billion, and they clawed back 9 billion. I don't know who was arguing about 0.4 billion. Honestly, it is incomprehensible to me that people refuse to deal with blatant fraud and abuse.
Yeah. So that just brings the question, what's going to happen in the future, because they got to continue to do these, not clawbacks, because this was, I think, the clawback. So next year they have to decide that they're not going to fund certain things, which they already did decide they're not going to fund PBS and NPR. I mean, that was humorous to me that anybody could stand there and say that PBS and NPR were anything but left-wing mouthpieces for the Democratic Party. It would be like the federal government giving MSNBC money but not giving Fox money.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting the way we think. And of course, Penn State or UPenn decided to crumble not to allow men to participate.
University of Pennsylvania took all the previously awarded medals away from Leah Thomas and gave them to the legitimate women finishers who would have finished after him, and wiped all the records out of the book
with letters of apology.
Yes,
that's the big part. And it's so humorous to me to see how these 80-20 or 70-30 issues are still being pushed by the Democrats. I mean, I know we were talking about Trump's successes, but we're looking too at disparate parts of the country where we have still these major cities with socialist mayors in charge, and now it looks like New York's up against the wire. My home city, home state, my origination. It's really hard to believe that they're going to most likely elect a socialist, if not communist.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get elected, Mike. I'll be honest with you. I really hope that the United States of America has this battle of ideas between capitalism and communism. I don't see how communism can win. Um, you know, I don't care what step of the ladder, of the socioeconomic ladder you're on. There's an understanding that there has to be a fairness and there has to be an equity, an equality in how we're treated. And you know, when people are talking about government-run grocery stores, it's like the phone call I got today.
Yeah.
Go to the DMV, right? I
Right.
don't want to go to the DMV. The people behind the counter there, whether they're beaten down by the bureaucratic process or they really are that stupid, that's the most inefficient operation, the most depressing operation you could ever go to. And they have inane and ridiculous rules that you have to follow, and you don't have a choice. So you do it. It's just stupid when you do it. And it's the same thing. Can you imagine how government-run grocery stores in New York City would work?
No.
They would only be They'd only be open 3 days a week, and they wouldn't open until 10 o'clock in the morning, and they'd only have half the choices. That's the stupidest idea that I've heard in a long, long time.
Well, when I think about public grocery stores, I think of something else in New York City, a public bathroom. If you've never been to a big city, let alone New York City, and used a public restroom or even tried to find one in the first place, because most of them have been shut down because of rats and people having sex in them and shooting up drugs. You think about public education, you think about public housing. We have all these problems with everything that's assigned public. Now, there was a time when it first started where public education was a good thing. I was a product of public education, but I had a grandmother that was a school teacher that started me reading before I ever went to even kindergarten. So, I was blessed. And then I was also blessed to move from New York City to Pennsylvania, where there was some really good schools here. And but over time, it's degenerated, and that's another thing that was on the Trump agenda that you mentioned was the being able to fire 14,000 people or whatever from the Department of Education. Hopefully, the House and the Senate will vote to basically get rid of it or reform it or shift it under some other department because it really doesn't have to be that big of a thing.
Well, let's first talk about immigration, Mike. Donald Trump said he was going to get rid of the criminal elements and he was going to get rid of the people who are here illegally. Now, as of yesterday or the day before, the total number of illegal immigrants crossing into the United States of America was, do you know what the number was?
It was very low, but then
It was zero. It was zero.
Well, no, the coming across the border was thousands, not many, but they didn't let any in.
Right.
So
There were zero got through our border. So remember under the Biden administration, they said we have to have comprehensive immigration reform in order to fix this. It turns out President Trump said,
No.
Border Patrol, nobody comes across. And guess what? Nobody came across.
Yeah.
So it turns out we didn't need comprehensive border control. We just needed a president with a backbone. And oh, by the way, he started sending these criminals back to their country of origin, putting them on planes. And one federal appeals court judge said, put a nationwide, you cannot deport any of these illegal criminals who are here illegally without giving you, guess what? The Supreme Court said, Mr. Lower Court,
Yeah, you're wrong.
you don't have that authority.
Right.
You are not superior to the President of the United States. You were not elected. You were not voted in. You are not the President. The President is in control of all the executive branches of every part of the executive branch. And by the way, Homeland Security and Border Patrol, part of the executive branch. When Congress passes a law, typically what they write into the law is the secretary shall promulgate rules too. And that's how we get into all these trouble under progressive administrations because these people put in stupid freaking rules.
Or ambiguous ones, yeah.
Yeah. And then they interpret them the way they want them to be interpreted, whether or not it says that or not. So Donald Trump got the Supreme Court to say, Mr. Lower Court, you can no longer put an order that hamstrings the President of the United States in the performance of his duties. Win number one.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump goes around putting tariffs on all these products that are coming into the United States of America. What happens next?
Prices went down.
Well, the first thing that happened is that all these countries, all these companies in these various other countries said, well, wait a minute. If I build shit in America, I'm not going to face a tariff. if I build it here and import it to America, I'm going to pay a tariff. So how much money in brick and mortar building and job creation did President Trump get from these corporations all over the world? Was it like six?
Oh, yeah.
It
It's
was
trillions.
it was big money.
Yeah.
There's so much emphasis on new jobs in America. I saw a thing with Mike Rowe the other day,
Yeah.
and Mike Rowe says, "You know what the problem we're going to have next?" He said, "I'm already hearing from companies that want to know where can they get technical workers." He said because they're planning on ramping up for all these manufacturers, and I'm talking about highly technical, white collar, blue collar jobs that are going to create products in very sophisticated factories in the United States of America, and they don't have enough workers. And Mike Rowe's lament was, we've closed down all of our shop classes in high school. We're not even exposing our high school students to these kinds of opportunities. Of course, they're not taking those. They're not looking for those jobs. So the first part of the tariff thing was new job opportunities in the United States of America. What was the second part? He said, I'm going to put tariffs. And companies that were gouging America with profits because we're the largest consumer economy. This is order of magnitude, and it's just meant for illustration. These are not real numbers. But let's say that the Japanese import a widget, and the widget costs $10. When that widget is sold in our economy for $10, Japan takes back $4 profit, because there's cost of making it, cost of shipping it,
Yeah.
cost of distributing it, all that stuff. So the $10 item maybe costs them $6. $4 goes back to Japan. So what Donald Trump said, look, I'm going to put a 20% tariff on your $10 item. That means you have to pay tariffs, $2 for that $10 item, because I'm putting a 20% tariff on it. So what the progressives ran around saying is, Donald Trump is going to put a 20% tax on everything you buy. Well, in reality, what happened is because those companies wanted to be in the U.S. market, the widget still sells for $10. But now they're paying a $2 tariff to the United States, and they're taking home $2 instead of $4. Now, again, understand, those are for illustrative purposes only. That's not real numbers. But you gain the concept. All these companies that have been making outrageous profits off the products that they're selling in the American marketplace are now making less profit. And what happens with the tariff dollars that go to the U.S. government? You want to take a stab at that, Wayne?
Well, hopefully it brings down our deficit. I mean, a certain percentage of it will. It gives them the opportunity to make up for what they passed in the big, beautiful bill on no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime.
But eventually will help reduce the cost of taxes to Americans. What else will help reduce the cost of taxes to Americans? All these new factories, all these new businesses, all these new, when they build a new chip plant in Arizona or Nevada, they make chips. The thing about a manufacturing plant is it takes raw materials and it takes labor, and it produces something that is exponentially greater in value than the cost of the raw material and the labor. And when they sell that product, the corporation is taxed based on the products that they manufacture. So that increase in taxes from the manufacturing of products in the United States, guess where that money goes, Mike?
Back into the coffers.
Back into the government coffers, which helps along with the tariff monies to offset the amount of taxes that American taxpayers need to pay. So you see how these are accumulating effects, which exponentially, eventually, if we get this is the whole disagreement between Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump says, if I get the economy humming hot enough, fast enough, I'll be collecting so much new money, new revenue from tariffs and taxes on stuff we're now manufacturing that we weren't manufacturing before, that I can lower the taxes on American citizens. And a couple of the ways we saw that in the big beautiful bill is no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. And what does that do? that puts more money in people's pockets.
Yeah.
And when they have more money in their pockets, what do
Spend
they do?
more,
They
buy
spend
more.
more money. And when they spend money, what does that do to the economy?
Stimulates the
There
economy.
you go. And we make more money off sales taxes and other kinds of taxes, etc. So the whole point of Donald Trump with these tariffs and these new jobs being built, being brought to America to avoid the tariffs is that's going to get our economy going hotter. That will produce more revenue to the government, and that'll have the ability to reduce the taxes that American citizens must pay.
Also has strong national security
Strong national.
type to it.
Guess what? Under Joe Biden, the United States military was running about 45,000 recruits, too few to fill all the slots that they wanted to fill. Typically, in the military fashion, what they did was they lowered their quota so that it didn't look like they were missing recruits. Guess what happened when Donald Trump became president, and he started treating the military with respect, and gave them raises and gave them more benefits. Do you know that they have a
Succeeded.
new? Do you know they have a new VA home loan law?
No, I missed that one.
They found that many VA home buyers and many veterans using the VA home loan were going into default. There was no process for saving a veteran's home in default under the old rules. So they now have a new law that allows the VA to step in and to pay some of the money in arrears so that the veteran doesn't lose their homes till the veteran can catch up. It's a great program, and it's another way that Donald Trump is helping veterans. So at any rate, getting back to what when he started showing more respect to the veterans, and you may remember that there was a 250th birthday for the United States Army, and what did the leftists say? Donald Trump is celebrating his birthday, and he's just like a little teapot dictator. And no, it was righteous to celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States Army. I'm an Army veteran. I wanted them to celebrate the 250th. What branch were you?
Air Force.
And how old is the Air Force?
I forget. 1949. It was after the Second World War. The Army Air Corps became the Air Force.
The Army Air Corps became the Air Force. So in effect, you're like the Air Force is like the illegitimate child of the Army.
Okay.
Inter-service rivalry. I love the nag. You know who's better? You know who's much more fun to nag than Air Force guys? Marines. Now you have to be careful because if you nag a Marine too much, he may beat the crap out of you because they're real serious about their Corps. But they take everything so seriously, you know. Ask a Marine when the last time he ate crayons was. Anyway. So, but Donald Trump, through the respect that he's shown the military in many and various different ways, guess what happened? Military recruitment is up all over the country.
Yeah.
There have been days when they had 10,000 recruits in a single day.
Yeah.
Crazy. So it turns out you didn't need to have a new military. You didn't need to have a woke military. You didn't need to have less PT standards. You didn't have to open up the transgenders and everybody else. All you needed to do was have a president who respected them.
Yeah.
And military recruitment shot up like one of those hockey stick things they show you on graphs and when a company's doing real well.
Well, RFK actually had something to do that too with his initiative to change the color of the crayons that the Marines were eating because of the special dyes. So he got rid of all the carcinogens in the crayons that the Marines eat.
That's right.
Yeah.
I understand that they like the green crayons the best.
That's what I hear.
I don't know. I guess in the desert maybe they like the tan ones best.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard green means they love each other,
Yeah.
Green means
Well,
I love you.
Green. There is a thing with green and some sort of erotic feeling. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Green being the color of money and all.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they're paying
What
for
else did we say that we were going to talk about with Donald Trump? We're talking about. Hey, what do you think about Alligator Alley?
Oh, Alligator Alcatraz. It's a great idea, and of course, Debbie Dingell was the big spokesman, I guess, that said she went down there and, oh my God, they got to brush their teeth next to the toilet. That made the big news on Gutfeld. Couldn't leave that alone. He said, I don't know where you live, but I brush my teeth next to my toilet too.
Every
and he's a
morning. Every
multi-billionaire. I've never been any place except where there might be the sinks are totally separate from the toilet in a really fancy posh place. But yeah, and so there's mosquitoes. There's mosquitoes there. Well, guess what? The mosquitoes are outside. They're inside. Oh, they're in cages, but nobody ever said anything about all the kids in cages under Obama and under Biden. Nobody ever said anything about 300 and some thousand children lost by the Biden
Oh my
administration.
God! Did you hear the
They
story
got
about
10,000 back, but
Did
that's
you hear
not
the
many.
story about the over 100 illegal immigrants that were arrested at the marijuana farm in
Yeah, and a bunch of
California?
kids.
And they
And
found
sex molesters.
they had 10 kids there that were part of the 40,000 kids that the Biden administration had
No,
lost.
300,000.
And these kids were basically, I mean, they were slaves.
Yes.
They were slaves harvesting the pot crop for this California
Right.
farm.
And there's more of that than American citizens understand. Because a lot of us, like you and I, we live in basically middle class to upper middle class locations, and we don't see what's going on behind the curtain. You cannot okay, so there's 300,000 missing kids. We've retrieved like 10 to 14,000 of them under Trump. And maybe let's just say half. Let's say 125,000 left that are in some kind of sex work, drug work, or slavery of some sort. Maybe they just don't have the addresses for another 125,000. But trust me, there is a lot of human trafficking going on in the United States. As a matter of fact, I don't know that now that Biden let all these people in, America might be the number one human trafficking country in the world, let alone these, what we used to call third world countries. But we've got them beat with human trafficking.
Well, the point is that despite the hue and cry and the hand wringing and the people rioting in the streets, the one thing we should talk about is the ICE raids that are going on to get rid of these violent criminals who are performing crimes on our streets every day. And the response, the organized response, literally of thousands of people who are being paid to interrupt and harass our ICE agents who are only doing their job, who are being paid to enforce the law. And then, of course, you have the sanctuary cities that are refusing to cooperate with them. And then, of course, you had some of the raids that are being conducted. Some of the officials in the city put out word in advance of the ICE raid so that they couldn't capture the people they were looking to capture.
Yeah.
And now we have certain members of the media and certain members of elected officials that are trying to reverse the arrest and deportation of these criminals, saying that that our ICE agents are Gestapo, and they are, secret police, and these ICE agents are wearing masks now when they go on raids, because what happens is the protesters and the anti-ICE people take pictures of these people using facial recognition. They identify them, and then they go and harass their families and their children. And so these ICE agents have to wear masks. Now, the criminals who are protesting the ICE officials, the ICE legal police marshals, the criminals are wearing masks too. But nobody's talking about their not being able to wear masks. Only the ICE agents are being told they can't wear masks, and that to me is obscene.
Yeah.
Because basically what you're doing is you're supporting the criminals against our law enforcement, and how can that possibly be in the United States of America?
Yeah, well, the problem that I see is the left cries about the quote non-criminals that are getting caught up in these raids. Okay, so let's address that really quick. Where that happens is sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. Now, stop and think. If the local police would simply hold and detain the illegal immigrants that ICE and Border Patrol once kept, they wouldn't have to do these raids to pick up innocent people. They would only be gathering up the criminals. But because the sanctuary cities say, oh no, we're not going to cooperate, now the people that are not criminals but still here illegally get caught up in the sweeps.
Yeah.
So it's actually the left that's causing the problem that they're complaining about. And this is so often the case with anything that the leftists argue about.
And the difference between the two administrations, the Biden administration had an app you could put on your phone that you could find out where to report to so you can get your name taken and you can be freed into the Biden administration facilitated these people coming into the country illegally. Well, Trump administration has an app too.
Yeah, self-deport app.
You can register yourself and self-deport, and they will put you on a list so that you can reapply for legal immigration into the country. So if you go to the app, you self-deport, put yourself on the list to come back in, you will be given consideration to come back in. If you don't, and they catch you without self-deportation, without registering,
You're never
You
getting
can't
back
come
in.
back in.
Yeah, you can never come back.
what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with
Nothing wrong.
that. That's fair. You
Yeah.
shouldn't be here to begin with.
Right.
Come in legally.
And again, it's not that I don't have a heart for people. I've traveled the world and I've seen, the kinds of countries these people want to leave. And I myself can sit here and say how privileged I am to live in America, how fortunate I am to have been blessed to be born here. I didn't choose that. It's just by God's grace, or if you're not a Christian or God fearing person, you might say, oh, it's just luck or chance. Whatever, you should still be grateful that you're here. And I wouldn't mistreat an illegal alien. I want everybody, I've said this before to Mac, if I was next to one, if they're hungry, I'll give them food, thirsty, give them drink, shelter on a personal level. The thing that we can't do is expect my personal, what I might do for someone, I shouldn't be able to impose on everybody in the United States. Because, again, it's the unforeseen consequences, the overcrowded emergency rooms, the long waits for disability checks and social services that American citizens need that are also poor or disabled. Our children's schools not, having enough of English speaking students to give a class to, but now they want to give a class to Spanish speaking kids or some other country. So it's a matter of resources. I mean, if I could wave a magic wand, I'm a Christian. I'd say the whole world's at peace. There's plenty and abundance. And as Elon Musk says, maybe that day is coming soon. We can only hope, because I don't want anything bad to happen to anyone, anywhere. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to our own country first, just like we have a responsibility to our own family first. So it's
You
pretty
touched
simple.
on education, Mike, and let's just talk about that for a moment as it relates to illegal immigration. What happens when these kids come to your school district? Because it happens in my school district. What happens is that we have a law that everyone's entitled to a public education. So these kids who oftentimes don't speak English at all are put into our local schools. Sometimes at a very young age, kindergarten, first grade kind of age, but sometimes when they're in fifth grade and sixth grade. So they're thrown into class with English speaking students and they don't understand English. Well, what happens when you don't understand? First, if you don't understand, you're bored. You don't know what's going on. You don't know why you're being warehoused. Sometimes those people who don't understand and are bored becomes problems. Maybe they're discipline problems. Maybe they're just annoyance problems. They annoy other people. So what do? We come up with English as a second language, ESL classes. But what can't you do? You can't advance the class to new topics, to new subjects, until the entire class has some level of understanding of the subject matter. So what you're doing by putting these people who don't speak English into the class with the English-speaking students is you're retarding the education of all of the students. You're slowing it down. I don't mean you're stopping the education. I mean that the students who don't comprehend the material, the rest of the class must wait until they do. So there's additional effects of illegal immigration into our country in the school system. Part of that problem is the rules and regulations that are promulgated by the United States Department of Education. So what Donald Trump is doing is he's trying to shut down the Department of Education. They actually have a roadmap for how they're going to do it. It started with the 1,400 people that they wanted to eliminate from the Department of Education, in Washington D.C., which they were the court. They went to court. It was sued. Eventually went to Supreme Court. Supreme Court said the president has authority over anybody in the executive branch. So we're going to close down the Department of Education. Now, does that mean that Congress has to write some law to eliminate it? Probably, because the Department of Education was created by legislation. There probably has to be some legislation to eliminate it.
Yeah.
But where do you think the money is better spent? Is the money better spent from Washington mandating certain things, or is it better spent by the school districts locally who know what the parents of that school district want their kids to be taught? And I would argue that the closer you put the money to the student, the more likely you are to get a good education.
Yeah, and you saw the president of the NEA last week just get up there and lambaste, all conservative values, and it's like the National Education Association it's a leftist organization. That's representative of the Federal Department of Education. It's the same thing.
But
And
the head of the teachers union also resigned from the Democratic Party platform committee.
yeah, and
saying
what were they doing there in the
they-
first place?
they were too crazy. The platform was too crazy for educating our children.
Yeah,
Now I don't know if it meant it wasn't leftist enough, or if it was too leftist.
too leftist. Yeah, hard to know what they mean when they
Yeah.
say it these
Yep.
days.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a lot of consequences that are unforeseen, and we could probably talk about this thing for 10 hours.
Well, what I wanted to focus on is the winning aspect, the success of the Trump administration in a relatively short period of time. We probably haven't touched on all of his successes, but the successes that we have touched on, what's the common thread through all of them?
It's Trump.
Well, yes, it's Trump, but conventional wisdom was
Oh yeah,
that can't be done.
right. Yeah,
You
stop listening
can't
to
do
so-called
it that way.
experts. You're right.
You're doomed to failure. That's never going to work.
Right. The experts have been wrong. That's what it's proven.
And I guess what is satisfying to me in a way that I can't really explain, because, I'm a Trump supporter, but I'm not a Trump acolyte. When he talks about himself in third party, and when he's very, very mean
Or it's the biggest and the best. Nobody ever saw anything like it. You'll never see this again. Yeah.
when he attacks his opponents in ways that are so hyperbolic, it's so over the top, that turns me off. I don't like that. I don't think he needs to do that.
I think he's toned that down some too since he got shot.
But that's the interesting thing. I've heard interviews with Selena Zito. Celine Zito. I think it's Celine Zito. She wrote a book about Trump in his first election. She's from Western Pennsylvania. She was there in Butler when the shooting occurred. She was part of the group with the president, and the president knows her individually because of the book that she wrote about him. And Donald Trump called her 8 times. The day after the shooting, called her 8 times and talked to her about various things. And she did more listening than she did talking. But the impression that she came away with from talking to Donald Trump that day, that he truly was moved that his life was saved by God. Mm-hmm. I can't prove that. But Selena Zito, from talking to him, that was her understanding of that personal
what Trump
conversation
thinks, yeah.
she had with Donald Trump.
Yep.
And I think that's a good thing for any leader.
Anybody.
I really do think. And I don't, I'm a Christian, so I believe in the Christian God. But I think if someone believes in God, that imposes upon them certain moral standards. And I think Donald Trump is a Christian, so I'm sure his favor is with the Christian God. But again, any individual that has a belief that their God saved their life, I think that enhances their morality and makes them want to be a more moral person.
And a little bit more humble.
Yeah.
It's pretty humbling to realize that you could have been dead just by a millisecond. I mean, there's a lot of us who are veterans that, have had encounters like that. I know I had one where the bullet came through the back of the windshield and out the passenger side. It's like, okay, that missed me by a nick.
So, what winning did we not talk about, Mike?
Oh boy, I don't know.
How long have we been going at this?
We've been going at it 37 minutes,
Should
38.
we probably
39
close it
minutes.
up?
Yeah, it's 40 minutes now.
Okay. Are you tired of winning yet, Mike?
No, I'm not tired of winning. Let's keep on winning.
Let's keep on winning.
All
Mac
right.
and Mike,
Out.
out.